One of the ways that Donald Trump wants to continue to make his mark on the GOP in this electoral cycle is through endorsements. Now that path became a little bit more complicated when we found out last week that he's now considering endorsing multiple candidates in the same race. I don't know what that counts for at that point, but there's also one other issue. And in particular, in some of the cases where he has endorsed challengers to the Republicans that he hates more than anything else in the world, some of those Republicans he despises and wants to drive out of the party are actually doing much better than their contenders in fundraising. So according to new financial reports, they are outraising their primary opponents. I want to give you some examples though. Representative Liz Cheney, still technically a Republican, although most Republicans would seem to not want that to be, more than quadrupled the fourth quarter fundraising haul of her top primary opponent, fellow Republican Harriet Hagerman. Cheney raised over $200 million to less than $500,000 from Hagerman. Lisa Murkowski brought in nearly 1.4 million in the fourth quarter of the last year. Her Trump-backed challenger raised just over 600,000. I believe Kelly Shabaka is the individual who released the spirit language video. That apparently was not a big, a donor stimulus, having the made-up language that God blessed. Anyway, Fred Upton raised about $726,000, more than 5 times what primary rival Steve Carra raised, and there's other instances as well. Now, I don't know, Michael, are you surprised by this? These are incumbents, so generally they are going to raise more money, but Republicans also kind of hate people who don't support Trump, and yet they are giving the money still.
Well, I wouldn't read too much into this other than it's good news if you don't like Donald Trump and you don't like his candidates. Look, the power structure of incumbency, we know what it is. They're getting it from all the regular places, from individuals, but also from unions that or groups that would support the incumbent, because the incumbent has presumably kept their interests in hand as they've been there. I shouldn't say unions, but I'm talking about groups that would typically, chambers of commerce, that sort of thing, that would typically support the Republican. The other part of it is the Never Trump organization was largely made up of what was the Republican moderate establishment or very conservative establishment that was not in the Trump camp, and that was the moneyed part of the Republican Party. Donald Trump's appeal went to a lot of the very much less well-to-do Republicans who would not be giving high dollar amounts in campaigns, especially out of state.
Yeah. I
mean, but I think it does tell you something. It certainly tells you that just the Donald Trump endorsement has not proven to be enough for these people. But there are reasons also to not just sort of jump to conclusions about it, because a lot like what I just said, a lot of the moneyed interests in the Republican Party are not Trump supporters, and the ones that are Trump supporters don't have as much money.
Yeah, or might be willing to support him if he is the leader, but also have their own independent interests. Outside of just him.
Yeah, there's no question. Also, a lot of Trump support came from political neophytes, and political neophytes can be standing in Indiana and interested in their Indiana race, but they're not going to write a check to Lisa Murkowski or her challenger in Alaska. Whereas, someone who's been doing this in politics for a while would be more inclined to do that, because they also would have more money to do it with.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, while some of his the people he's backing might have a little bit of trouble with fundraising, one individual who has not had trouble with fundraising is the former president, Donald Trump. He begins this year with $122 million in political cash. He raised $51 million in the last half of last year, which was actually down from the $62 million he raised in the first half of the year. So fresh off an election loss and an attempted coup, people handed him $62 million. He wasn't even really in the public eye. He wasn't tweeting. He wasn't really doing rallies at that point, and they showered him with tens of millions of dollars. And by the way, he's raised all this money, and as we've said, he wants other candidates to want his endorsement. He wants to be the kingmaker. Well, he's not doing much financial kingmaking. In the last half of last year, he raised that $51 million. He only gave other candidates 1.5 of it. And 1 million of that went to a nonprofit where Mark Meadows serves as a senior partner. which is its own issue with campaign finance. But he isn't doing much financial support of candidates.
No, I mean, he's a huckster. He's a cult leader, and it's curious as to why people give money to cult leaders. It's curious why hundreds of people that move to Guyana to follow a cult leader, and this is how it's playing out with Donald Trump. And yeah, the truth is that this money goes to him. He doesn't spend it on other candidates, like you just said, John, and it still doesn't stop the flow of money to Donald Trump. So he's fooling people. He's fooling people regularly. He's making them part with their money. I'm on all of his email lists. They come in every day asking for money. They're fooling me into thinking that Donald Trump is going to have dinner or lunch with me, that he's going to sign this thing for me, that he's going to make me a certain level of title within his organization. And that's how they give the money. And that's how he has so much money stockpiled.
Yeah, 100%.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.